That is right. It is the division of power between the state governments and the federal government. Okay? So there are certain powers only the federal government has. They're called the enumerated powers. They're found in Article 1. All right? There's also the implied powers, or a clause called the necessary and proper clause, which allows the federal government to stretch the elastic clause. Okay? So that's that's the national powers. And it's found in the Constitution in Article 1. What about the states? Do they have power? Where are the powers of the states found? That's right, to the 10th Amendment to the Constitution. They're called the reserved powers. And there's certain things that only the states can do. Public health and safety, wellness, education. Those are powers that the states have. All right, licensing, punishing state criminals, and the way in which they do that. All right, so the states also have powers. Are there certain things that both the federal government and the state government can do? Yeah, those are called shared or concurrent powers. They hold those powers concurrently. So there's some overlap. And those of you guys that have jobs, I'm sure you're very well aware, both the federal and the state government will collect taxes from you, okay, out of your income. And there are just certain things that both can do. All right, those are shared powers. Are there powers that no government can do? Yeah, what are those called? They're the denied powers, okay? And we made a list here of several of the denied powers, like ex post facto laws. They can't make a law and then punish you for breaking it before the law was made, okay? So all kinds of examples of powers that are denied to the government in the Constitution, okay? When it comes to the states relating to one another, the federal government is supreme. The federal government gets to kind of settles the disputes. It's usually the Supreme Court that's settling those disputes. All right? Okay, so that's federal government. That's state government. State governments are also allowed to create smaller governments. What do you want to call those? Local. Let's call them local governments. Look at that. Who knew that there was a cool graphic for Sophia? But there is one. Now, we know that the federal government's power comes from Article 1 of the Constitution. We know that the state government's power comes from the 10th Amendment. Local governments have no power in the Constitution. Their power is not defined in the Constitution. Local governments are all created by states. They're all created, abolished. If the state of West Virginia says Beckley's no longer a city, so be it. Now, it doesn't mean Beckley it doesn't exist anymore. It just means they're not allowed to have government. Be like Coal City. Coal City has no government. The county government, okay? So, local governments, therefore, need a charter, okay? Now, what I'm telling you about, all local government, doesn't matter what you are, city, town, county, parish, whatever you're called, they are not inherently sovereign. They're not just like their own little private place. Everything that the county, city, town, village, whatever, all their power comes from the state. That's called Dillon's rule. Dillon's rule. So it all depends on what state you're in. And so local governments, therefore, need a charter. You guys know what a charter is? It's kind of like a little miniature constitution, but it's only for that particular city or town. Just kind of like the basic policies of that local town or government. New York City has a charter just the same as Beckley, West Virginia. New York's just, I don't know, a million times larger. Okay? All right, so now the way in which we're going to look at local governments is from the perspective of our own state. I think that is logical. That's where we live, okay? Because if you were in New Mexico, they might have something different set up. They may not have counties. Like Louisiana doesn't have counties. They have parishes. It's all about what the state establishes. So we're going to look at it from the West Virginia point of view, okay, for our local governments. Now, for the most part, in the United States, what are the basic administrative units of local government? Do you guys know? If you don't live in a city, you probably live in one of these, and that's where your local government is. Like if you live in Coal City or Crab Orchard, no. Counties, okay? Counties are by far the largest and the most basic. Every state except for Louisiana and Alaska have counties. Louisiana has parishes, Alaska has boroughs. They call them boroughs. They're counties. They just have different names, okay? Now, these counties have pretty broad responsibilities, and they are an extension of the state government. And so they do a lot of the stuff that the state government's responsible for. You know, welfare, environmental programs, courts, the registration of land, the registration of babies being born, and the registration of people dying. Birth certificates and death certificates are issued by counties. Did you guys know that? If you need your birth certificate, yeah.
What are you supposed to do with it?
Your family can use it to do things like collect insurance, stuff, things of that nature. It is. The name of the organization that handles all that stuff is called Vital Statistics. That's true. That's true. But yeah, death certificates are necessary. They're necessary. Part of society. Okay? All right. So, the counties, very basic. They have broad responsibilities, and they're used by state governments to carry out the job, the powers of the state. Welfare, environmental programs, courts, registration of births, lands, and land and death. Like, any parcel of land in Raleigh County, if you want to know how big it is and how much it's worth and who owns it, that is public info. You go to the county courthouse, and you can look it up, and they will give you that information. And how much taxes have been paid on it, if the taxes have been paid on it. And if you want to buy it for taxes, you can, depending upon what it is. Okay? So all that is done through county government. All right? So I'm not going to say beneath county government, but another aspect of local government are like cities and towns. And those have a special name. They're called municipalities. Municipalities. Now, the largest in our county is Beckley. It's the largest in our county. Sophia is also a municipality. Mabscott is a municipality. Rodale used to be a municipality, but it's not anymore. The state of West Virginia says it's not. Leicester, I think, is a municipality. Is there still Leicester Police Department and Leicester Fire Department and a mayor of Leicester? Then they are a municipality. Okay? But like I said, there's no Coal City Police Department. There's volunteer fire departments, but municipalities actually have real firefight. Like Beckley has a Beckley Police Department with trained firefighters, and they're professionals. Nothing against the volunteer firefighters. It's just different. Okay? It's just different. All right? So municipalities are city governments, and they are usually created in places where the population is dense. Where there's more people, more government is needed to cater to their needs and services. So state governments do not just arbitrarily assign municipalities, and they're not guaranteed. Like Rodale used to be a lot more populated than it is now, guys. And it actually hung on to be a municipality a lot longer than it probably should have. I mean, Shady Spring is not a municipality. Shady Spring is big. A lot of people live in Shady Spring and Daniels and Beaver. There's a lot of people there. They're not municipalities. okay? But Rodale was. All right, so it's up to the government to determine that. So, the state government. So some of the, a lot of intense struggles emerge out of the scope of authority. Like the city of Beckley should handle what within the city of Beckley, like paving roads and maintaining it and scraping the road. Like how much is the city of Beckley responsible for within the city of Beckley, and how much will the county be responsible for? Like I live in the city of Beckley and I pay extra taxes because I live in the city of Beckley, because when if I pick up the phone and call 911, my house on fire, the Beckley Fire Department is going to come put it out, trained professionals. If I call 911, I need police. The Beckley Police Department. I have my own police department, own fire department who cater to the citizens of Beckley. Okay, if you're in Coal City and you call 911, Beckley Police Department's not going to come and help you. Okay, you'll have county or state troopers. All right, you have services. You just get them from a different place. Everybody's covered. Everybody has services. It's just done in different ways. Okay? So cities are the largest of the municipalities. Beneath cities are towns. Sophia is a town. It's a little bit smaller. That's really the only difference. It's just a smaller community, often run by a mayor, town council, 4 or 5 people. Yo. It is. Beckley is a municipality and Sophia. But Beckley is a city. Sophia is a town. They're both municipalities.
Yeah, I was about to say because they're town.
Yep, they are both municipal. I think they both have their own but their own water grid, water system, their own sewer system.
My mom's a municipal clerk.
For the town of Sophia. Okay? Some people call it the city of Sophia, and that's fine. I mean, it's similar, but it's town. Okay? It's a little bit smaller. I mean, we all know Sophia is not a big metropolis. Neither is Beckley, but Beckley's closer to a city than Sophia. And it's not like one's better than the other. They both can do the same type of stuff. All right? One's just larger. That's all it is. New York has got the same type of stuff. It's just significantly larger with a lot more bureaucracy, a lot more moving parts to it, because there's, 8 million people they got to take care of. There's not even 8 million people in the state of West Virginia, okay? Not even close. All right, so, but, towns, the definition of a town varies from state to state. Like, West Virginia is an extremely small population, not a big state at all, okay? Like, Beckley would not be a city in other states. Like, if Beckley were in North Carolina, it would not be a city. It'd just be a town, okay? North Carolina's got big cities. They got, Raleigh and Charlotte and New Bern. They got bigger cities, okay? All kind of places. And that's just kind of how it is. So it varies from state to state. And it's fine, because who determines what places are municipalities? Each state. Okay. So each state might set specific restrictions on the size of each type of government. They might say, okay, once you hit 100,000 residents, you go from town to city. All right. So, they can do that, but it's entirely up to that state. Okay. So we've talked about counties. A county's a county. All right, like Raleigh County. Within the counties, there are 2 types of municipalities: cities and towns. Is everybody with me so far? Okay. Now, there is also another type in which you are very familiar, that's not really city or town. It's kind of special. In fact, it's even called special. It's called a special district. And that is like, it's a part of government that has a very specific function, like the school system. All right? So, a special district is a local government restricted to a particular function. So, in Raleigh County, the largest special district is the Raleigh County School District. But it's not the only special district we have. There's other public service districts. Can you think of any? There's libraries, there's sewage, there's waters, there's parks and recreation. All of these things are special districts. Like if you parents live in Sophia or Beckley, when they pay their water bill, they drop it off at the public service district. It's a special district that does utilities. Okay? Some special districts have elected heads, like people in charge who are elected by the people of the community, like the Raleigh County Board of Education. They are elected. Others are appointed, like Mr. Price. He's appointed. He is appointed by the elected members. He serves at their will. If Mr. Price, if the Board of Education collectively think that Mr. Price is doing the good job, they let him go. If they think he's doing a good job, they keep signing his contract. And it's totally up to that special district, to that Board of Education. Okay? Some jurisdictions, some special districts, like ours, they have special tax money. The citizens of Raleigh County vote every 5 years to determine if we want to pay extra tax money so that our special district will have extra money. And we do, believe it or not. And it's very rare in the state of West Virginia that happens, because typically education is not valued in West Virginia. Okay? So we are very fortunate. That's why whenever you guys play sports, you get free buses. It doesn't cost you a dime. Hello. Okay. Devin, have a nice day. This will be on Schoology. All right. Yeah, so some have elected heads, and some generate, it's called a levy, which generates additional revenue. So school districts are by far the most common form of special districts. Everywhere's got school, like public schools. And the purpose of school districts is to provide free public education to children. That's what it's for. And it didn't cost you a dime to come here. We weren't taking, there's no cover charge at the door. You just walked right in. Okay? So, school districts have their own budgets. They, if they want to have extracurricular programs, they have to be funded independently. Like our sports don't really get much money. It's all based on gate receipts. Like when I was AD, we never got a penny from the county for anything ever. We had to make it ourselves, and that's why there's a lot of fundraising. But school districts receive a lot of money from states and the federal government for specialized programs. Like, did you guys eat breakfast this morning? Doesn't cost you a dime. That was all paid for by the state and federal government. Didn't cost you a dime. It's all subsidized. Doesn't mean it's going to be good, but you get what you pay for, right? Yeah. All right. So, school board members. Look, we have several school board members. I think Gordy Roop, Mr. Roop, is the one who represents us. He has an insurance office in Crab Orchard. But there are, they're all from different parts of our county, and they are elected in nonpartisan elections. You guys know what that means? A nonpartisan election. They do not run as Democrat or Republican. It's nonpartisan, so you just run. Okay. So that the school board members are elected in a nonpartisan election, and then they supervise the officials like Mr. Price, Dr. Starcher, Mrs. Sheetsley. They are like the superintendent and assistant superintendents of our school, and they serve at the will of the Board of Education. Okay? So questions on these different forms of local governments and how they operate in your daily lives. Okay? All right, so, like we've been talking about federalism. And you guys did a case brief on this case not too long ago, right? Who could tell me about this case?
They made a second, a federal bank, and the state of Maryland was taxing the bank, and yeah, he refused.
Uh-huh. Is that okay? Can any state tax the federal government? No, they're not. They're not allowed to do that. And that instance where a state was attempting to tax the federal government went all the way to the Supreme Court. Okay? So this is the very first ever Supreme Court decision that is used to define the relationship between the national government and the state governments. Okay? It happens, the instance happened in 1816 when Congress chartered the Bank of the second Bank of the United States. The first one was under Alexander Hamilton. So we get the second Bank of the United States. And in 1818, the state of Maryland decided that they were going to start taxing all banks within their borders that were not chartered by themselves. So any bank that existed in Maryland that was not chartered by the state of Maryland, they were going to tax. That is, so they're going to start taxing the Bank of the United States because it was chartered by the United States of America. Okay? So, when the head cashier, he's like the bank manager. Don't think of him as just like a teller, okay? He was the guy in charge, all right? James McCullough. His title was head cashier, bank manager. He's in charge. He's not like, he's doing okay, okay? James McCullough refused to pay this tax as he was the head cashier of the Baltimore branch of the Bank of the United States. When he got the bill saying, hey, you owe $15,000 to the state of Maryland to exist, he said, I'm not paying it. I'm not paying it, okay? So the state of Maryland sued him, okay? They sued him. That's why it's called McCullough versus Maryland. The state of Maryland sued James McCullough for not paying their bill, okay? Now, James McCullough, it goes to trial, at a local trial in the state of Maryland. Well, what do you think's going to happen? He's going to lose. The state of Maryland is suing him. He goes to the state of Maryland court. He loses, okay? So, he appeals the decision, and the decision goes to the United States Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court hears it, and they unanimously decide that it was not lawful for the state to tax a federal entity. In doing this, they say that even where in the Constitution does it say the federal government can create a national bank? Nowhere. But is a bank necessary? Do you need a bank? Yeah, I think you do. All right. So is it proper to make a bank? So does it meet the criteria of the necessary and proper clause, the elastic clause? Yes. Okay. So the McCullough versus Maryland affirms the usage of the necessary and proper clause and says that the federal government is well within its right to exercise that power. Furthermore, so that means there's more to it than just that. Furthermore, the state of Maryland is not allowed to tax this bank because of the supremacy clause. What does the supremacy clause of the Constitution say? Whose laws are the supreme law of the land? The U.S. Constitution or the state of Maryland? U.S. Constitution. Where does it say that? Where does it say that in that the Constitution is supreme to all the states? The supremacy clause in the Constitution. It's right in there. Okay? So one of the furthermore part is that the Supreme Court decided that in instances where there's disagreement between the federal government and the state government, who reigns supreme? Federal government. This is important. This is what federalism's all about. The federal government, the division of power. All right? McCullough versus Maryland does a lot to define that relationship between the federal government and the state government. You guys with me? What would have happened, do you think, there's a what if the state of Maryland would have been allowed to do this, would have been allowed to tax the federal bank? Would the taxation have stopped at just banks? Would they have taxed every other federal agency that resided in every state throughout the United States? Do you think Maryland would have been the only state to tax the federal bank? Every state would start taxing every federal bank and every federal institution. So that would have been an extremely costly proposition. The federal government would just be doing nothing but paying taxes. It would be bad. It would be horrific. Okay? So, McCullough versus Maryland, they did a good job. The government was working then. It was a good job. Okay? All right. Shortly after the McCullough decision, who's this picture of in this right here? You guys know who that is? It is. It's John Marshall. Know anything about him?
He was the Chief Justice.
First Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. I don't know that he ever went to Huntington. Maybe he was, but that's what Marshall University is named after, this guy. Okay? All right, so shortly after the McCullough decision, John Marshall's Supreme Court had another opportunity to rule in favor of the federal government again, and that was in a court case called Gibbons v. Ogden in 1824. All right, what Gibbons v. Ogden does is it involved a dispute that arose after the New York State Legislature granted a man by the name of Robert Fulton. Remember Robert Fulton from your American history? He's the guy that invented the steam locomotive engine in a steamboat. Okay? And the New York State Legislature told Robert Fulton that he had the exclusive right to operate steamboats on the Hudson River. What does that mean? If the government gives you an exclusive right to any type of resource or service, what are they giving you? What's the board game? Do not pass go. They're giving you a monopoly. So if I, lived in 1824 and I had a steamboat and I wanted to make money ferrying whatever up and down the Hudson River, would I be allowed? No. Who's the only person allowed to operate steamboats? Robert Fulton. Okay? All right, so do you see how this could be problematic? Now, who is the entity allowing Robert Fulton to do this?
New York.
The state of New York, the New York State Legislature. Okay? At the same time, the United States Congress licenses a ship to operate on the Hudson River. The exact same waters. Robert Fulton's like, that's not my ship. I have the exclusive right to this water. You guys know where the Hudson River is, right? What's some what's a place where the Hudson River is? New York City. Okay, so we're not talking like a couple dozen people a day using the river. All right, we're talking it's a big city, even in 1824. All right, so big money is involved here. So, needless to say, there's a disagreement because one person's operating with a license from the federal government, saying, "Hey, Congress says I'm allowed to operate on these waters," but Robert Fulton says, "Hey, you're not allowed to be here, dude. I have a monopoly. I'm the only one. Just me. I have the exclusive right. And you're cutting in on my business." So they sue each other. Okay? They sue each other. So it was a pretty complicated case, both procedurally and factually. So what the main question here is to what extent can Congress regulate commerce? Because that's what this is. They're using these ships for trade, to make money. To what extent can Congress regulate commerce? Now, we all know it is up to, Congress is allowed to regulate. It is literally an enumerated power. It's written in there, word for word. Congress can regulate trade. To what extent? That is the issue here. Okay? That is the issue here. So, in this is the court case, Gibbons v. Ogden. This is what the Supreme Court ruled. The Supreme Court ruled that Congress's power to regulate interstate trade included the power to regulate commercial activity as well, and that Congress had no limits except the ones that were in the Constitution. I'll say it again. Essentially, Congress has no limits other than what the Constitution says when it comes to regulating trade. In other words, did Robert Fulton get to keep his monopoly? No. So New York had no constitutional authority to grant a monopoly to a single steamboat operator because that interfered with interstate commerce. We love competition in America. We're built on it. We see somebody selling fidget spinners for $12 a pop. I want to start selling fidget spinners. And then Liv wants to start selling fidget spinners. And Alyssa wants to start. Pretty soon you can get a fidget spinner for $1 because competition has driven it. But if the government gives me a monopoly and says, Liv, you're not allowed to sell them. Alyssa, you're not. Only Mr. Moore's allowed to sell them. Fidget spinners, $15 each. Come get them. You guys know what a fidget spinner is? Oh yeah. Okay. Can you even find them anymore?
Yes. Yeah.
What a fad, you know?
They used to take them from us.
Really?
Yeah, they took them from us in middle school. Like they banned them.
Probably for a good reason.
Yeah, I was the first one.
All right. Definitely a fad. And that didn't last either, did it? Like, how much are fidget spinners now?
I don't know, like
They-
$6.
$6?
I've seen something like unless you get like
They ought to give them away.
They break fast.
Yeah,
the ones
Yeah.
at Cracker Barrel wasn't that expensive.
really.
Yeah.
Cracker Barrel stuff's all expensive.
They're stingy at Cracker Barrel.
Yeah.
At Walmart, they're like.
Okay, so hang on one second. I'm going to talk to you guys about fidget spinners. But does anybody have questions about Gibbons v. Ogden and why it's important? Do you see how it relates to federalism? All right.